Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? Today's Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. 310 days into the new year, 55 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? Big show tonight. Been waiting for this. Here we go. Tonight, John Burroughs is here. John Burroughs is back. Sort of. And tonight, hang on to your seats. Tonight, we're going to discuss A-Tip. We're going to discuss To the Stars. We're going to discuss Bigelow, Skinwalker, Tic Tac, and the group around Tom DeLonge. That is To the Stars Academy. That is what we are doing tonight. I'm really looking forward to this. A lot has been discussed lately out there through the hard work of individuals like John Greenwald. Lots of stuff in the media in and around Luis Elizondo as well. So we're gonna go through everything tonight. All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. On the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planets. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow John Burroughs on Twitter if he had a Twitter account. He says he does, but he hasn't looked at it in years. The good news is, John, Twitter's going to be big, so maybe you can come back and join the family. Tonight, John is with us. We're going to be discussing the ATIP program and the possibility that it was a sweetheart funding deal for Senator Harry Reid. We're going to discuss some of the group that is surrounding Tom DeLonge. We're going to talk ATIP. We're going to talk TTSA. John entered the United States Air Force in 1979, served 27 years, both in active and reserve. He is currently United States Air Force Reserve, retired from the Air Force. Reserves, Burroughs had various assignments throughout his Air Force career, like Luke Air Force Base, Osan Air Force Base, Grissom Air Force Base, Castle Air Force Base, with reserve assignments at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Prime Beef, Williams Air Force Base, and Reese Air Force Base. The most notable assignment, though, began in 1979 when he was assigned as a security police law enforcement patrolman at RAF Bentwaters in England. We all know what happened next, because in the early morning hours of December 26, 1980, while working law enforcement patrol at RAF Woodbridge, He had a life-changing event, which has now been called Rendlesham. It has become one of the most documented and witnessed sightings by the United States military in known history. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, John Burroughs. John, how are you?
Good, Jimmy. Thanks for having me back.
You know, John, I've kind of made light of this. This is the return, right? The return of John Burroughs. I want to thank you, okay, before we get started tonight for this conversation. And I know that over the last, has it been a year? It's probably been close to that. You wanted to back up a little bit off of and out of the UFO community and just leave it to others to research. But tonight's show was just too important, and you decided to come out of active retirement. It's kind of like, I look at it like this, John. It's like when Michael Jordan retired and he came back and played a couple of games for like the Washington Senators, right? Let's look at it that way.
Okay.
Are you cool with that?
No, I'm fair enough. And in actuality, I'm doing some more stuff behind the scenes with Race Hobbs too, because it's like you want to walk away, but then you can't totally.
No, so it's like The Godfather, man. It's like The Godfather.
Yeah.
They keep pulling me back in, but we need you. And I had said in my intro on this show that you and I have had many, many interviews over the years, and each show just ratcheted itself up, and they just got better and better, and the conversations were not only revealing about you on a personal side, but the other research that you have done over the years has made each show better than the last. And I look forward to that. And this is my first question. One of the reasons why those shows are so great and you are who you are, it's because you fight for integrity and being honest with a moral character in play as well. That's a very difficult path, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, okay, look, this probably will start right off not making some people happy, but ufology is basically you have people that are trying to understand different things that have happened to them. Then you have some people that, seen something in the sky or have some interest in it. But ultimately, so many of the people that they turn to, they're out there to make a living. And as I got involved in this, in the late, like 2008, where I started really getting into it based on the 30th anniversary and stuff, where it's just so many more people have jumped on. And since To the Stars went public 2 years ago, there's even more. And then you have all these shows and everything else going on. And there's really, the bone isn't that big. And everybody's fighting for their piece of meat on the bone. Mm-hmm. And there's just not enough meat. And so you've got some of these guys out there making these brash statements and stuff like that. And it's sad. It's sad when in fact you need to know the history of this going back, way back in time before you can even really start to really understand how this has evolved and what's going on. And then you have to want to go where the truth takes you, not where you wanted to keep your website and everything else going.
And the next question, which is probably the most important one to establish things for tonight, is why does Fade to Black have you on tonight discussing To the Stars? Right? What direct or indirect contact do you have with To the Stars and the cast of characters surrounding Tom DeLonge?
Well, it started with the fact that back around the 30th anniversary, I started trying to get stuff together for Rendlesham, and then I got sick. And I'd had some issues prior, but not life-threatening issues. So I started to work with trying to get medical records and my personnel files and get a VA claim going and get in the VA system. And every step of the way, I ran into a wall. They said I wasn't in the Air Force when the incident took place when I was injured. They denied me access to my medical records and so on. So as this was all going on, I went to that Steve Bassett conference. What was it called? Do you know on the top of the tip of your tongue?
Citizens Disclosure.
Yeah, right. I went to that. Now, I put Steve on the spot because I wasn't really keen on going because it was just going to be the same stuff. And don't get me wrong, I understand you've got to put stuff out there, talk about documents, talk about military incidents and stuff, but it was just the same stuff. You're rehashing the same material that's been on, and they were going to get these ex-members of Congress. So I sat and thought, well, if I'm going to go, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to, first of all, Steve, you got to let me bring my lawyer, which he didn't know I had one. And we're going to sit there, and they're going to talk to us like they would like a real incident that happened with inside the military. You know what I mean? They're questioning an event. And we brought the documents to support the fact that my records have been messed with. I was being denied medical records and all this other stuff, and it was all laid out in front of them. And they were just taken aback. And when they went on break, they started making phone calls, and they came back, and a lot of them didn't even know about the classified record section for medical records, that if you're involved in a classified operation, your records are classified, and you can't really get access to them. And a lot of these guys that were retired didn't even know this. Now, two of them did. That Gravel, the guy that was involved in the
Senator Gravel, yes.
Oh, yeah. And he actually grilled us a little bit, going, "What are you still holding back on us?" And you have immunity if you tell us. And they all jumped in and said, "No, you don't. You don't have the immunity we have." So that was interesting. And then there was a congressman, and I can't remember his name. He was an older guy. His district was D.C. And he knew exactly what I was talking about. And on the break, he was retired, but he still had a staffer that he did some work for him. She approached me through him and came up to me and said, "No, we know what you're saying is true, and the documentation you presented is true, because we deal with this all the time," or we did, because what's there, Langley and everything else. And all these guys that were working in these operations would get injured, and then they didn't have access to their records. So they were getting denied treatment and the proper things they were supposed to get. So she actually ended up helping Senator McCain's aide with some of this stuff too. But what happened was, after we did the event, and they wrote out a letter sent to President Obama and to the head of the VA at the time. And it was interesting because when I finally did get some of my case file, I forced it through the VA to get it out. The letter from Obama was in there. And it was signed off by Podesta. So Obama and Podesta were aware of the incident. And so I don't forget to talk about this later. One of the things that I found out later was the Department of Justice got in the middle of all this. But what happened was, after we came back, about 2 weeks later, my attorney, Pat Frasconia, got a phone call from a CIA agent, or retired / whatever you want to call him. He was still a contractor working for the government and all this other stuff. And he wanted to meet with him and then me and then go over some stuff because he had some interest.
And who was that?
Kit Green, Christopher Green.
Okay. So the list starts. Okay. So Kit Green is up to bat first. Got it.
Right. He's up to bat first. Visits the attorney in Jackson and then blows him away. I mean, it was like, here he is, 1 minute he's in Jackson, Mississippi, and he does this UFO conference, and he meets me, and he agrees to help me, and we start FOIA, and we start all this stuff. And we were actually in the process at the time. We were already sending out notifications to witnesses to include the command within Bentwaters. Would you do an interview in Lee of subpoena? Because we were going to file a federal lawsuit against the federal government having to do with my records and why are they classified? Why are they being held back? So he shows up, meets with Pat, says...
Oh, let me jump in. So this was 2010?
This would have been in 2011.
2011.
Or 12. Maybe it was... I lose track of it because the conference was in 10. We came back in 11. I think it was 12, if I remember right. It was
gotcha.
whenever they had the Bassett conference, it was right after the conference that Kit Green showed up.
Got it.
So it may have been 11, 12. I'd have to go back on my notes. But so he shows up, meets with Pat, then comes out to meet with me in Sedona. Okay. So he gives Pat a generalization of what he was interested in, what he wanted to do. And he also said that what was being done to me was wrong. And he knew a lot about what was going on, which we thought was strange because we hadn't talked to him. But he said he was willing to testify. He would be willing to testify in our favor on the whole thing that was going on. So, okay. So I met with him. And when he approached me, he checked me out. And I didn't know this at the time, but he told Pat off the side, he says, we got to get this expedited. He don't have much time left. His heart's really failing. So he meets with me, and then he lays out his spiel, and he wants to draw DNA through Gary Nolan, who was on To the Stars for a while, and Kelleher, who was on To the Stars. And they want to do a DNA sample and put it in a testing pool. And then they also want to do an MRI on my brain to identify certain features, which, it's kind of complicated, but it all ties into the DNA and everything, and the encounters you may have had or what it's affected you and all that other stuff. So we did our spiel, and I'm military. I have an investigative background and stuff, and I'm just like, I look at him and I'm like, this is kind of unreal in the first place, but I'm like, no, I'm not just going to give you my stuff. I said, what am I going to get out of it? I'm sick. I'm getting stonewalled by the government. They're not helping me with my records. They're not releasing stuff. They've denied my claim because they said I wasn't even in, and all this stuff is going on. What do you want? It's just not going to happen. And I said, on top of it all, how am I going to be able to back up, or how are you going to prove to me whatever you do when you come back? Because one of the things you just told me was this DNA testing can only be done 2 places, and not many people know about it. So how am I even going to know what you tell me and what's going on? So I told him no. And then he was leaving. And then when he was leaving, he made a phone call back to Phoenix and said, well, we're going to fly in Nolan and Kelleher tomorrow to Flagstaff, Arizona.
And
so they flew him in. They brought him. Actually, I think they flew Nolan into Vegas. They drove down from Vegas to Flagstaff, and they met with me, and they did a full court press to try to get my DNA. And I told them no.
And what did they reveal to you at that point? Was it a general interest in UFOs, or were they looking out for the best interest of John Burroughs? Were they trying to be your friend?
It was, at the time, I know a lot more now because it's all kind of evolved. But at the time, it was very vague. It was simply, we're doing a study on the effects of DNA on people that have had incidents like yours. There's been quite a few of them. They said most of them have never seen the light of day. Yours just did. It got declassified. And Green had told us the day before that it was a mistake that it ever got out. It never shouldn't have gotten out. And a lot of different events that went on have never gotten out, and people were injured, and had issues like me, and that they were trying to understand what it was that, injured us and how it affected us. That was the vague part of it. Now, what I didn't know at the time, but it became apparent later was, so I don't forget this later, when you had all that stuff, the document dump by Knapp and stuff about all the stuff that went on and, the funding and everything. One of the things that came out is that when they were doing the work at the Skinwalker Ranch, they brought in special ops forces who had an encounter at the ranch with the phenomenon that's there. And some of them were injured by it.
Was this part of, okay, I don't want to get too far ahead of our skis, but bringing in special ops guys up to Skinwalker to do some testing, guys that have had experiences, to bring them up to Skinwalker, was that government funded?
Yeah, it was part of the Harry Reid program. That's the thing that's what I mean with this. If you read the documents,
right.
If you go back in and look at these documents, and they skim over them, and a lot of people pick out what they want within it. And when I had my show with Linda Moulton Howe, Phenomenal Radio, we had Knapp come on and he talked about it. Okay. And what was funny was we knew quite a bit about it because I'd done some research, and we talked to Corbell right before we talked to him, and Corbell dropped some information on our show prior to that about all this. And yeah, they actually brought the special operations troop on to have an encounter with this phenomenon. And they did.
Now, going back to this period with Nolan and Kelleher and Kit Green, was there any conversation back then about Bigelow or Bass or
No, because that was one of the things. One of my first questions was, who's funding this? Where's this coming from? We won't reveal our sources. He was just so vague, and I just said no. So what happened was Pat got a very scathing phone call back from Green, was very upset. They dropped a lot of money. They didn't get what they wanted. And so he went back to Detroit, and these guys went back to their home base. And so, but we're going to keep in touch, he told Pat. So what happened was they kept pushing me for stuff, and I kept telling them, hey, check this out. When you do something for me, and that is do something with inside the government to get this rolling, we'll talk afterwards. So magically, within about 3 weeks, a letter comes through Green, which he's a doctor, to the attorney. So it's doctor, attorney, and I'm a patient, privilege, spelling out why I was injured and what was wrong with me.
So you couldn't get to the bottom of it, right? You were struggling. Your stuff was sealed, but Kit Green managed to pull that off.
He knew exactly what to put in that letter. And so what he said was, because McCain had finally got me in the VA to start listening, because he did some threatening with all the stuff that was going on. And I was going in to see the VA doctors, to start with some of what was going on and everything, because I'd already been denied the first time when I saw the doctors, because they said, well, the injuries that you said happened didn't even happen to you, or couldn't have happened to you. You weren't in the military. And that was a big mess. So I'm going in. So I get this letter, and it's got classified stuff in it. And so I take the letter to my VA doctor, and he looks at that letter and he leaves the room, and he said, I'll be back. And he was gone for a good 30 minutes, and he's on the phone. You can hear him in the next office over on the phone. Comes back in and he says, we're getting you down to the cardiologist from Prescott within the next 48 hours. You'll be getting a phone call, and we're going to take it from there. So I'm like, whoa, everything just changed. So I'm in the cardiologist's office like 2 days later. He's got the letter. He's looking at me. He checks me over, does an echo, and says, you're going to be going down to Tucson within the next week for evaluation for surgery. And I'm like, surgery? He goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, this is bad. He goes, you've got to get in there right away. So I'm like, okay. So they send me to Tucson. Now, one of the first things I picked up right away, which was interesting, was, you know how when you go in to see a doctor, the doctor calls you in, your surgeon and stuff, right?
Right.
Well, when I get there early, because this was a long drive from Sedona, Davis Mountain, down to Tucson to the VA. So I left early. I got there quite a bit early, like 45 minutes early. So I'm sitting in there, and I'm watching this surgeon come out, or appears to be the surgeon, because he's calling in the patients. When it's my turn, a different doctor comes out, calls me in, takes me in the back office, and we started a negotiation. And he starts to talk to me about they want to do this and that day and all that. And I said, no, none of that's going to happen today. I go, I got to be back at Sedona. My son's got a football game and tonight, and none of this was laid out to me. I said, I came down here for an evaluation for surgery. So if you're going to do all this other stuff, it's going to be done differently than this. And he wasn't happy. Had me go back and sit in the room, come back, brought me back in, started talking to me some more, looked at my echo and said, we've got to take you back downstairs right now. And they bumped me in front of a whole bunch of patients, did another echo, and bam. Next thing I know, I'm back upstairs. I see the surgeon, and everything goes forward, and I get surgery out really quick. Everything just went just like that after Green got into the middle of it.
Now, and who did you meet next from the camp? Was it put off?
Yeah. What happened next was, now I'm in touch with Nolan. I'm going back and forth with Nolan because they're still working me on the DNA. Green's in the middle of it. And then next up is put off. Now, here's a very interesting story, okay, that it can be verified really easy, okay? It's very interesting how this all broke out, because one of the things that we were going to put out a book called In Encounters in Rendlesham Forest, right? It was due out in the spring of 14. And one of the things that no one knew about, except the select few in the UK, was that within Project Condign, there was a paragraph in there talking about UAP radiation affecting observers in the Rendlesham Forest incident. Now, that was all being kept quiet because it was going to be in our book, and it was going to kind of be one of those, bam, you're not going to believe this, right? And what happens was right before my surgery, they fly Pat and Linda into Austin, take them through the facility, and he presents Linda with some documents that back up terahertz radiation. Now I'm going to tell you, because he made it public later, what affected me, which is terahertz radiation, okay? What caused the damage and effects. Gives Linda a bunch of stuff, okay? She goes public with it right away, and I didn't even know she had it, and blows the cover of the book. And so when I found out she did Whitley's show on it, I got on her, says, please don't do Coast in 2 weeks. I said, this is not going well with the publisher and everything. And she goes, it's a news story, I have to do it, blah, blah, blah. So she spilled the beans about one of the better parts of our book on Coast to Coast the night after I had my major surgery. And Put Off and Green made sure she did that.
And
they were setting the table for To the Stars already at that point. Is what I'm trying to tell you.
Right. And I'm looking at the clock here before we hit the break. So Put Off comes in the picture, and this was around 2013.
When they met with Linda and Pat. Now, I then got brought down to meet Put Off later. We can go into that after the break.
Okay, we'll do that after the break. And what about Jim Semivan?
Never met Jim Semivan.
Elizondo.
Yeah, I met with him. He came to Bloomington Normal, and they did a shoot for I believe it's called Unidentified, which they included Rendlesham in that. And they did briefly touch on Condign and I don't know if they did Condign, but my medical stuff within it. And they brought the lady that worked in McCain's office in on all that. And that was a very interesting interview with her because there were things that I didn't even know that she revealed on Unidentified about the whole thing.
What about Mellon? Have you met Chris Mellon?
No, never met Mellon.
What about Norm Kahn or Paul Rapp, the two other doctors?
No.
Okay. And Tom DeLonge?
I know, and I was kind of hinted I could, and I didn't want to meet him.
Okay.
He's a joke to me, and I've said this all along, so I'm not pulling any punches. This is not the type of way you're going to try to expose the American public to this, whatever we're dealing with and what's going on. And to have this guy be the figurehead for it and have his company, which is an entertainment company, which is a joke to me in the first place, run all this, I don't want nothing to do with that end of it, period.
Now, they shot for Unidentified, and did you appear in the series?
Yeah, it was episode 6, if I remember right.
Right.
Or 5. It was either 5 or 6, I can't remember.
And I just have to ask you, if they came at you to do season 2, or have you shot season 2?
No, I haven't shot season 2, but they approached me on some stuff for season 2, and I told them to take a flying leap.
There you go. Okay. All right. So, but that's the establishment right there. When we come back, I want to get back to Hal Put Off, and we've got to jump. We got to go backwards to go forwards. We're going to go back and talk a little bit of Bass and Bigelow and Put Off, and then we'll start to move forward. Our guest tonight is John Burroughs. We're going to do it all tonight. We're going to discuss TTSA, the ATIP program, OSAP, the cast of characters that is surrounding Tom DeLonge, what the real agenda is, and, of course, Tic Tac for good measure. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, John Burroughs. Tomorrow night, Fader Night. Open lines all night long. Tonight with John, we're discussing To the Stars, ATIP, the cast of characters surrounding it, what it is and what is actually going on. And now, John, right before the break, we started to get into ATIP, and I want to establish what ATIP may or may not be. And with that, the public impression laid out from the beginning, going back to December of 2017 in the New York Times article, which started this explosion, was that the government, the Pentagon, had a secret UFO program. And again, the perception of the public and the way that they read through this was that there was this secret UFO program inside of the Pentagon headed by Luis Elizondo, and they were deeply involved in the study of UFOs. And the implication is that Luis Elizondo had a team, maybe offices inside of the Pentagon, and they're looking at UFO events, crashes, crash retrievals, video, and they are studying this. And it appears today that is entirely not the case. And what ATIP is, whether it's aviation or aerospace, that can be debated. But what is ATIP?
Well, okay, let's break some of this down, because as soon as this came out, they were doing this. I said it before the break. I couldn't believe DeLong was the figurehead. I mean, it's just like, first of all, that was a strike one for me, because it's like, this can't be serious. And I stand by it. It's not what if you're trying to get the general population to get behind you and support you, that's not going to do it. Now, if you want these young kids running around, headbanging kids to support you, what's that going to do for you anyway? The money comes from the middle class, middle generation that are working, and Congress listens to them. They don't listen to these kids. Okay. But okay. One of the things that caught my attention first off was that, and I did meet Lou, was I don't want to throw mud on it, but why would you fund something and then kick it to these scientists to review it if he was the one analyzing the tapes? Does that make sense to you, Jimmy?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so if he was the leader of this group, which again, they were vague on that, and I never could answer from him behind the scenes. You know, Mellon's job was, they created that job after 9/11, and he was third in command in the Pentagon for intelligence. That's the kind of person that would run the program. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
That would be the deputy director of Intel would be in charge of it because of the ramifications. You had the head of the Senate supposedly want this done, get the money out, and everything else. That would be who this would be reported to. Somebody like that. Not saying it was the guy. So don't run around tomorrow and say Burroughs said it was this guy. I'm just saying that's the level of control the program would have. You know what I mean? Now, what was interesting was, first thing Reed said was, in these letters that Knapp released, was that they wanted this to be an SAP program. Okay, so here you had a guy that now comes out and says he doesn't like the way the government's doing this, thinks we should have more disclosure on all this and move forward with this. But when he was in position in the Senate to have the investigation done, what's the first thing he wanted to do when this started happening?
Fund.
Well, no, he wanted to put it in an SAP program, which is the highest classification of programs you could put it in. He wanted to bury what they were working on.
That's right.
Now he wants you to believe he wants it out.
And the program itself, ATIP, and I need clarification. This is for me to get an understanding, because I've looked at this so much and I get more confused the more that I look at it. ATIP itself was outside of the Pentagon and was actually based out of Las Vegas, right? This was a BASS program. BASS got the contract.
Yeah, when that was, and when you led in with the show, you said, was it, and people right away, within a matter of days after New York Times story broke, that was one of the first things people were saying was this just Reed, who Bigelow is a big time player in that area? Was he just rewarding him a contract? Well, I don't agree with that, Jimmy, and I'll tell you why. We'll get into this in the first place. Is Bigelow bought out a project from NASA, which is now on the space station, which is now going to be part of the trip to the moon and to Mars. So this guy already has the support he needs inside the DoD. So 22 million to him is chump change. Do you know what I mean?
It is. He's a billionaire.
So it wasn't a little sweet deal for Bigelow, on top of the fact that what a lot of people, it's got lost in the thing. Bigelow had a son who died. And one of the things that he wanted to do was try to figure out if he could reach out to him or whatever, beyond the dead and all this other stuff. So that was part of the reason why he got drawn into some of this stuff in the first place, never mind what else was going on. So he had a genuine interest in it. He had guys like Edgar Mitchell, and they had NIDS at first and Bass. So I don't think this was a little kickback to Bigelow. There was something going on. And if you want to say what was the reward for it, would be to get more research, to get more funding for whatever they want to work on technology-wise. Not just a sweet little, here's 22 million, have fun with it. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And was ATIP, after the funding came in and Bigelow gets the contract, this was the $22 million contract.
That they've disclosed.
Right. Was ATIP researching the phenomena, specific UFO cases and videotape, or were they just funding research and theoretical papers to be generated to look into different aspects of this, whether it's time travel or propulsion systems or the stuff that Hal was working on as well? Was it that? Was it Eric Davis and a bunch of theoretical research that was getting funded?
Well, what I can grasp on the interviews I did with Davis, talking behind the scenes with Putoff and Green and Nolan and stuff, it seems to be in the papers that Knapp's released. And, I looked at them, this was a year or two ago, so I don't have them in front of me and it's not fresh. But it appears, based on what they said, Knapp did an interview with us and Corbell, a percentage of it did go for an evaluation of these tapes and some of this other stuff. But it looks like a lot of it went to the ranch.
To Skinwalker.
And the investigation of the ranch, right. And what they were doing there. And then Bass was a program that was involved with the overall picture, including what NIDS was, and it was a forward of NIDS and all that. And I don't want to try to get too technical because I read a lot of this stuff before and it caught my attention, but it's been about over a year. But what I can tell you is I think a lot of it went, based on the interviews I listened to and stuff, a lot of it went to Skinwalker. And the first thing that caught my attention, and that's when I wanted to verify it through Knapp and then Corbell, was you're telling me the government sent in sanctioned special operations troops to the ranch? Yeah. Think about that.
Yes.
They brought in our special ops troops to investigate the phenomenon.
What were the special ops troops guinea pigs, or were they observers?
Well, if you go to Kelleher and Knapp's book, there was guinea pigs. There was stuff done. And matter of fact, Knapp was supposedly a guinea pig at one point. He sat in a chair. But what I got out of the interviews, and this is why I always beat my head with these guys and why I got so fed up with them, is they'll say one thing one time, oh, well, he didn't really mean it that way. But what I got out of them was these guys came in to go in because of their training and to go back into the area of the ranch where the stuff was going on and see what they could dig up and encounter and what happened if they had an encounter.
And when you look at, advanced aviation, threat identification program, what would that, or aerospace, whatever you want to use with ATIP, what would that have to do directly with Skinwalker? Because Skinwalker was more of a paranormal situation, or do I have this wrong?
Well, that's a good question. And the interesting thing is it all goes back to EM frequencies, frequency fields, and different things like that. And then obviously the DNA testing they were doing, which is interesting too, because Kid Green just did an interview which blew me away that he did it, but then he's never followed script like he says he does privately. He did that. They did that interview for Jacobson's book, and they spilled the beans on the DNA stuff. And then he turned around and just did an interview with Richard Dolan, which you and I had a private conversation a few weeks back that you need to get Dolan on to talk about the interview with Green.
Yeah, I had him on 2 weeks ago talking about the Kit Green interview. And
okay, so before I go into what you just asked me, what did you learn from that interview about what Green had to say?
Right.
What did you learn?
The thing that stuck out for me with Kit Green was the alien autopsy stuff, where he felt that, I don't even want to say that he felt, that he directly said that he was hoaxed, right? That he was shown certain things and was told something else. He was, that the alien autopsy film was real, and then he felt that it wasn't. But that's the one thing that stuck out for me about Kit Green was that he felt that he was lied to.
Right. Well, what a lot of people didn't zero in on is what he said to Dolan. And I tried to pin him down on this, and he supposedly going to visit me to talk more about this privately. I said, Kit made a statement that based on all his analysis of the injuries that have happened to the different people that have had the encounters, which I can't get an answer from him, but you would have to assume that some of the DNA studies have come back now because it's been more than a couple of years, that everything that they've been able to analyze, the injuries that have happened were not consistent with ET, but were consistent with terrestrial, i.e. our technology. So the military guys that have been injured, and he didn't say military guys, but he said the people that he's dealt with, and he talks about his patients and all this other stuff, the injuries that they've sustained are not ET. They're terrestrial. And so that's pretty eye-opening.
What's the reason to create a tip?
Well, that's one of the things that you never, that goes into this. Okay. The problem, okay. Like I was shocked when you called me and wanted to do the show, because majority of the people that do this stuff want to tippy toe around these guys. They're rock stars. You know what I mean?
Right.
They got the New York Times to do something with it, which how could they not when you bring these tapes and, these different things out? And I'm not saying that was the wrong thing. Okay. But they got the New York Times to do some stuff. They did get mainstream news to briefly talk about it, but there's nothing against it. They didn't continue with it on and on, because they don't continue with anything. You know what I mean? Whatever's this week's flavor of the month, you don't ever hear about it again unless there's a political reason behind it. So that's not surprising. But they're rock stars. So all these guys want them at their conferences. They want them on their radio shows. They want them in their blogs. So no one asks them tough questions.
No, they won't. They won't. And the team that is there at To the Stars, and when you look down the list and their history and their CVs and their qualifications, everything goes back to the Department of Defense or the Pentagon or the military-industrial complex in one way or another. And the recent announcement of the CRADA agreement with the Army,
I can tell you about that,
which is where I'm going now. That To the Stars was supposed to be about disclosure and bringing this out finally into the public and getting this UFO question answered. And it has now taken a couple of interesting turns, where it seems that with the metamaterials, this agreement with the United States Army and also the Navy is involved too as well, that this is now folding back from and away from the public and back to funding and bringing it back to the Department of Defense, and it has nothing to do with the public or the betterment of the world.
Well, number one, okay, but before I'll go into Bigelow. But number one, the To the Stars, that's disingenuous. To the Stars did not sign a contract with the Department of Defense. They're an entertainment organization. Tom DeLonge, I want him, he runs his mouth all the time. Prove to me that you've been read in. Show me where you've been read in. Show me where you have a security clearance. Because if you don't have a security clearance, you don't get squat. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
And he runs around shooting his mouth off like he knows all this crap. And they are not. And I know this much with Mellon and Putoff and Green. They're not going to give you stuff, an outsider like DeLong, anything that's going to violate national security. They're not going to violate their oath. Okay? So that's the first problem. The second thing is, if you go back to how this all got kicked off with Knapp and Bigelow, there was an interview that he did on Coast to Coast with Knapp. And they went into this thing, and I went around and did some conferences and talked about this. And I've talked about this on the radio show. Bigelow stated, we're not going to get disclosure. We're going to get confirmation. And confirmation is they're there. There's something going on, and we're going to stop right there right now. And we're not going to go any deeper into what it is. And that's what's going on. Navy finally said, yeah, well, we're going to make it easy for the pilots to report it, and we're going to look into it, but we're not going to tell you what we find out. You get these members of Congress that they got on film a little bit early on when this broke, and they came out and said, yeah, I was in a classified briefing. I can't talk about it.
What were you able to, how much time did you spend with Lou Elizondo?
I was with him on a Friday afternoon and all day on Saturday.
So a day and a half.
Yeah.
What did you ask him?
Well, I'll give away trade secrets. I don't necessarily ask a lot. I let them talk.
Okay.
I'm reading them. I'm not there. The only guy there's two guys that have impressed me in this. And I can't say that the other ones wouldn't because I haven't met Mellon. But Gary Nolan is a nice guy, but he's a scientist. And you know what that one going with that. He's a good guy, but he's not real world, savvy street fight type of guy. Green is slick. Putoff's a nice, very intelligent man. Very, very, boom. He's the man. And he's running this. And he's running this whole thing. And then you have Mellon, who you don't get where he was, within the Senate, and then number 3 in the Pentagon in intelligence without not having your shit together. And then the dream team is finished off with Steve Justice, who ran Skunk Works. Think about that. What's his background? Technology, getting funding through the government and everything else, and then delivering a product.
And then there's Elizondo. Right.
And he never, if you're going to ask me, he came off like a guy that was a foot soldier.
Did you guys discuss his role in ATIP, about him being the director?
He gave me, yes, we did, and this is where you probably get mad at me, and people in the audience will get mad at me. When I give my word, I give my word. And he laid out some stuff to me, and a little bit of it did get revealed in this last series. But he laid out some stuff to me and everything else. But what he didn't impress me on is he's not what they're saying he is. And what I mean by that is he's not a technical guy. He's not the guy that's going to analyze his stuff. He's not the guy that's going to understand how it works. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
He might be able to go out and gather intel from something's there, what is it, and stuff, but he's not a physicist. He's not, one of these guys. He's not even, he's a counter intel guy where Green was an intel guy, and there's a difference. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think I do, in that
he was an intel analyst, and that's not what Lou was.
If I had some information on terrorists that were about to pull something off, I would go to a guy like Elizondo. He's going to go with his team and figure out what's going on. Right. But
right. And then he's also going to be a guy that get dropped inside behind enemy lines to spread disinformation.
He looks like he would be dropped behind enemy lines, right? He's an intimidating looking guy.
But he doesn't come off that way. He's a nice guy. But I'm just saying he's not the way he's been spun up. That wasn't my impression of him. And the other thing that was my impression of him, and it could be because he's counter intel, but he's made mistakes when he's done these speeches and stuff, is he doesn't have a thorough background on a lot of this stuff.
On UFOs and technology.
Yeah, and some of the technology. Because what I told you earlier on was I said they approached me for the second season. Well, one of the things that I did, how much time do we got? 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. I did FOIA through the MOD. I went after them on condign technology and everything else. And I got a FOIA back that is national security based. It really is. I got the kitchen sink thrown at me of why they wouldn't release most of it and how important it is not to get out. And in it, they blacked out most of the stuff, but they left open a particular company that builds tanks. And so I was able to start background checking this company and working on that end. But I brought that up, and he acted like he didn't know anything about it. Well, just recently, they contacted me about those documents and wanted to know some more stuff. And I told them, no, I'm not working with you. You screwed up the last one. I'm not doing this next one.
Who contacted you?
The producer of the show directly that did Unidentified that I met last year, and she contacted me again. And she wanted these documents and wanted me to talk about it. And I didn't know about the contract with the Army yet. And then the contract from the Army comes out. Well, here's the thing. When I did my research, and I did some of it, and there's a guy in England that does a lot of really good research. His name's James Warrow, and he's great. And I know he's listening tonight. So James, you're the man. We did some back checking, and he did some back checking. And what we found out, and through an engineer, is that they are able to cloak tanks.
And this was revealed in a Freedom of Information Act document from the Ministry of Defense.
Well, the device that makes them able to do it was what revealed.
Right. And in this document, it mentioned tanks in a particular company. I'm not asking you to disclose that.
Company, American company, yes.
Right.
They forgot to black that out.
Okay.
And we were able to backtrack BIA systems in England.
And they are able to cloak tanks.
Yeah, they've actually put that out on the internet. That Zumwalt class destroyer, which is interesting. I didn't know the Navy was involved in this. The Zumwalt class destroyer, they show pictures where they can make it disappear. And the tanks, they're working on that. And it involves material and certain technology. But the issue they're having, and it goes back to the DIA paper that was released to McCain's office, to McCain's committee, that has to do with the metric taser paper that Putoff wrote. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The issue they're having is the tank is supposed to go from A to B, and it shows up somewhere else completely when it decloaks.
Well, but like the Philadelphia experiment, like the Eldridge.
That's the closest thing you can, yeah.
Now we're getting into real science fiction here, but the fact that this was mentioned in this Ministry of Defense document would imply that they have a cloaking ability. That's one thing to make something invisible to the human eye. That's that could be some type of advanced parlor trick. Or are we talking about making something physically disappear and appear somewhere else?
That's the second one.
Really?
Yep.
That's going to be a lot for people to digest here. And is this what Putoff and terahertz frequencies is involved with the metamaterials?
Yeah, and it has to do with the EM generator, the power source, the computing, all that. It all ties into the whole thing.
And if that is the case, then is this an off-world technology, or is this something of this earth?
Well, here's the interesting thing, and I talked to James today. He tracked down some documents where the Navy was working with certain technology, and they were trying to patch up a hole in the ship, and they would use this laser EM frequency technology.
Right.
And things were not, when they were doing it, things were ending up somewhere else, like the Philadelphia experiment.
Okay, let's take a break right here. We got to continue this when we come back. This is getting to be pretty deep, and the other part about this, though, John, which we're going to discuss after the break, is this what the CRADA deal with the Army is dealing with? I find that very, very interesting. And why would they go through an entertainment company to get to this technology? This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, John Burroughs. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, John Burroughs. We're talking about To the Stars, A-Tip, the cast of characters that is involved. Incredible conversation. Tomorrow night's Fader night with open lines all night long. Okay, John, these are pretty big revelations. And I understand, cloaking and technology and active surfaces and the ability to mimic your surroundings, and I get that part of it. But when we are going to another level of using focused EM energies to make something disappear and appear somewhere else, that is something altogether different. And what does any of this have to do with disclosure and To the Stars and an entertainment company and UFOs?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit. Okay. When Green showed up and we went through all this, the original senator was helping with Senator Kyle, and his aide was the one that found out my stuff was classified. Then he retired. He didn't run for re-election, and McCain took over. And what happened was that when the bombshell came back where they denied me my disability and everything based on the fact I wasn't even in the military, and there was clearly plenty of proof that I was, that's when things got ugly, and he got really into it personally, right? And Department of Justice got brought into this. But what's interesting about this, Jimmy, which most people, again, it goes right over their heads, is that who did they go after? What committee did they go after when they went to D.C.? They went after McCain's committee before he died. And what is his committee? Military Technology Appropriations. And the DIA, which Putoff worked for, came in and gave papers that Knapp released, which they're not, what they gave out was stuff that you could find on the net. So this was the declassified version, not the classified briefings that took place with McCain and his committee. But they went to McCain to get money for technology. And McCain knew, if he didn't already know before my incident, but once it got ugly in mine, he found out some stuff that he wasn't happy with. I met with him personally and we talked about some of it. And so who did they go to afterwards when they found out, first of all, McCain was handling my case? They went straight to McCain and appropriations. Why would you do that if you were looking for disclosure?
Yeah, let's continue. Let's put this together.
Right. So now you have McCain, and I've tried to tell these people, look at the research papers and look at what was being discussed in them and where they're going. And then, well, they run into a dead end. The guy that wrote it won't tell me. Well, there is a trail. You just got to know how to go backtrack. It's just like how I got to the MOD the way I did. You have to start looking at documents and what's in them. And there's a guy who was an arch nemesis of mine for a long time, and then I've come to gain some respect for him and stuff. His name's David Clark in the UK, and he goes after the MOD viciously on technology and stuff like that. And he's come to believe now they're hiding something. He's just not sure what. But the thing is when you go through documents, they slip up. They give little pieces of information. It's just like the one I got, BAA Systems and the tank company. And then you start researching the companies, and you start researching the patents, and you start doing this, and you do more FOIAs. You know what I mean? And you start finding out the technology. And James Worrell's great at doing that. And Then you start finding stuff out like, well, the Navy was doing some of this stuff and they had Philadelphia experiment type incidents that are real and declassified documents. But was it the Philadelphia experiment, or was that just a cover story to cover for the stuff that they're learning as they go along? It's just like do you know how radar was discovered?
Well, if we stay on this, John, the ability to do this with the tank or with the Zimwalt, class ships with the Navy, then the materials to do this are already in play. Was this because of Hal Puthoff bringing these metamaterials already to the DoD, or why go back and fund research into these metamaterials if they've already made the progress with disappearing ships and tanks?
Well, for starters, you'd have to bring somebody inside that would be willing to talk on the DoD how R&D is done and how projects can get taken, partly developed, and put on the shelf. Like, for example, one of the things that's being discussed now to take us into space is a technology they've had for 25 years. It involves nuclear propulsion and some other stuff, right? Magnetic stuff. Well, that was developed and then shelved because of cost. Okay. And look at the Y-22, the stealth plane, right?
Right.
They were going to build, well, I'm just going to give you a number. I don't know, 500. And the cost was pretty prohibitive. And they only built 250. And then later the F-35 came in, which is going to be double what each Y-22. And they said, oh my God, if we just would have built the 500 Y-22s and then kept building them, the Y-22s actually could more than do what we need, even though the F-35 will eventually be a better airplane based on the helmet. So it's all about R&D, funding, and viability. And one of the guys that was an investigative reporter and ended up working inside the Pentagon for Andy Marshall, who goes by Yoda, who got booted out under Obama and is now back under Trump, is advanced technologies cost a lot of money, not only to develop, but to implement. Look at the cost of the F-35 compared to the F-16 and the 15, you know what I mean? And the F-18. So there's always a hesitant on funding and stuff. Well, what was one of the things that they did, and they did this in the series, and they've done this publicly. Well, we can't say for sure. What did Mellon say? Not Mellon, but Justice. Well, I can't say it isn't our technology, but I can't say it is, and I definitely couldn't if it was. And then, you have Mellon sidestep it and Elizondo leave it as, well, whatever it is, it's a threat. And if it is from somewhere else or it's another country has it or is trying to get it, we got to beat them to it. So what's that go back to? The industrial military complex and getting funding. And you can't go to Congress and get funding on a whim. You know what I mean? You got to have a reason and you got to have a threat.
Well, okay. So then what would the Pentagon want to do with this technology, in that we could have invisible tanks and ships? We could save a lot of money, build less of them because they're going to be invisible. Nobody's going to be able to shoot at them or see them, or build 1 billion more tanks. That is a proven technology, and we understand that. Which
well, that's
way?
What DeCaro said, there's always a battle. And that's the interesting part that kind of caught my attention. They say there's a battle inside on the hard right Christians, as far as stopping this. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think there's a hardcore battle on funding, and it's no different than what happened when they wanted to create the Space Force. Why do we need the Space Force? We have the Air Force, and it can just be a branched off, but they want to separate it for whatever reason. There's always a battle for funding every year. Each service goes in with their toys and what they want, and then it's viability, like you said. I can build. Trump himself came out and said, well, what do we need the F-35 for when we got the 15, 16, and, 18, and there's nothing that can counter that right now. On top of, I remember how he went crazy about that new catapult on that Ford that didn't work. Why did we change it when it didn't work? Why do we spend this kind of money when the technology we have just can be modified and work for years to come? You know what I mean? So there's a constant battle for funding.
Yeah, and how with TTSA just released Bob Lazar's autobiography. I'm not sure if Bob actually wrote the book, but nonetheless, that was just released. It's all about UFOs, unidentified. How did we suddenly twist this company from being an entertainment, paranormal, supernatural UFO company into what appears to be a defense contractor? And was that the intention from the beginning, do you think?
Okay, here's where I really, when you said I walked away from this, where I really got disgusted. And it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Number one, I got to be careful what I say, but I had privy inside information that other people didn't get. And some of it had to do with Linda, too, at the time, because she was working with the BISMA. And I guess she's going to do a tell-all coming up here in the next week or two with Greenwald. But the thing is that they thought they could fund this through issuing stocks and bonds and, books and all this other stuff. And that's why they made it entertainment. And I was on the horn, and I'm not going to tell you who inside the organization, but we got into it pretty heavy. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, the money you raised or could raise this way wouldn't even fund the building and a year's worth of research, let alone that. Don't try to sell me the fact that you really thought that, who's the author that wrote the book with DeLong? What's his name?
Well, which one? I mean, there's Peter Levenda wrote.
Levenda and stuff.
Right.
Not saying that they did crappy work, but there's no way that this guy, based on his background, and he ran a major defense program, so most people will figure out who I'm talking about. And he's going to try and sell me the bill of goods. They thought they were going to fund this and everything through private enterprise. They were looking for DoD contracts. And if I didn't believe it then, when I found out about the documents that they went to McCain right away and his committee, come on. That's all about technology funding.
Just like your Freedom of Information Act MOD docs.
Right.
Right.
Right. And BAE Systems, one of the things that is out there now is they have a drone that can go underwater.
And staying on this, and kind of sidestepping a little bit into the Tic Tac videos. What's your take on that? Is what was seen out there, was that man-made? Was that terrestrial?
Well, let me backtrack to our incident. Okay, when our incident took place, I mean, it was much simpler times. And the whole state of technology was different than that we knew of. And you had no clue. It was the infancy stage of, radars had been around since the 40s, but all this stuff, you didn't have the internet and all this. So when we saw the stuff that we did and the encounters that we had, we walked away like, no way. There is no way. And, besides the fact they tried to sell it as the lighthouse. But I never told you this, Jimmy, but through research through James Worrell, guess what? The lighthouse may have played a factor in the Rendlesham case. And you know why?
Why?
Because they had it wired up to an EM technology, generating technology, and it was pulsing EM technology generation pulses into the forest area where we were.
Okay.
So already they were working on this stuff. Marconi was, which ended up being bought up by BAE Systems and General Electric. They were working on EM technology and stealth and everything right back then. Okay. But we didn't know any of that. And neither did the majority of the people at the base. Maybe the Wing Commander Williams did, and I can talk a little bit about him in a minute. It'll blow your mind what I found out about him later on, right from him directly. But the thing is that we walked away saying there is no way, do not insult our integrity or insult our intelligence, that this was us. Do you know what I mean?
And
not possible, but 30 years later, all these documents were declassified, and by golly, you can pretty much explain just about everything that happened to us, why it happened, through technology we were working on right outside the back gate at that time.
Would that explain the object in the forest, though? Maybe.
Yeah, because, well, first of all, the blue lights in the sky, they were working on lasers and tracking plasmas, which tie into all this later, that they could direct with the lasers. What did Paul say he saw? Beams of light coming down and these things flying around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, at that point, we don't have that kind of technology. There's no way it is. Yeah, well, we actually did, and we were working on it. And they were actually using it to track Soviet satellites, and one of them may have been brought down during the entire event, which would Hall even hinted way back could have been an international incident on top of everything else. Now, here's the interesting thing about a craft. What Peniston claims it was a craft, but when you get close to EM frequencies and stuff like that, and if you go into Condyne, it tells you that when you get close to something like that, it alters your perception, what you think you're seeing, what you're dealing with, and what's going on.
I could, and certainly with Peniston's description, but he also had that interesting download about time travelers from the future.
Well, let's don't go into that tonight. But
no, let's not go into. Let's get back to the.
It's been really discredited in a lot of ways.
I know. I realize that. I realize.
And what I'm getting at is I'm trying to focus in on technology. And so, is Fravor being lying? Most likely not. Could he know it's our technology? Possibly, but I doubt it. And one of the excuses is, which I just did a show with Kevin Day and a couple of the other guys that were involved, and we kind of got them thinking a little bit about why it could have been a test. But ultimately, they're going to have to test this on real live equipment. They claim none of them were debriefed, but they wanted all the data, which is sensors and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
That took place with this in both incidents, right? But the interesting thing, which no one wants to talk about, what did one of the pilots say in that was released? It's a fleet of drones. It's a whole fleet of them.
Right.
But no one wants to talk about that. Oh, wait a minute. Let's go back in time a little bit. Well, what'd you say? What was the guy the other day? Rogan said, well, I believe now because the pilots saw something, right? Right. But wait a minute. The pilots, one of them said it was drones. Well, he just misidentified them. It wasn't drones. Well, no one followed up on it, number one. And why did he think they were drones? So there was a clue right there that, well, maybe it was our technology. Do you understand what I mean?
I do. And
but no one wants to acknowledge that because all the people that get behind this just believe that they just saved us because we're going to get disclosure from this group that show me where they've done anything to further disclosure. And what I mean by disclosure is have they identified what it is or anything like that? And have they done anything with Congress to get them to openly tell you what we're dealing with? No. Everybody that they've interviewed said it's classified. They're not going to talk about it. The Navy says we're not going to talk about it. The Army's not going to talk about it. And whether you like the president or not, he came back and gave a clear interview that he basically said he's not disputing the pilots, but he's saying it isn't what people think it is.
Yeah, it's not UFOs.
Right.
The consistency of this happening during naval exercises on both coasts, right? And two different incidents. And then I had somebody that reached out to this program. You know about it. Everybody knows about it now. Who was in the Coast Guard a year before the 2004 Tic Tac incident, was asked by the captain of his ship that he was on for the crew to go up above deck and look to the skies and observe what was about to happen. And it was a high-flying craft. They thought it might have been an SR-71. It was up really high. Dropped a white drone down from 60,000 feet, and it came down above
what year was
sea
that?
level. This was 2003.
Okay.
And so that this was not a UFO. This was dropped from one of our aircraft, and they watched it being tested. And could this be another version or the same? It doesn't matter of what the Tic Tac was, and that this has nothing to do with ET or off-world technology or civilizations, but that all of this folds back to and comes back around with what is going on with TTSA today, which is government contracts, disappearing ships and tanks and advanced technology and terahertz radiation affecting different materials. It seems like that's what we're dealing with here, John.
Right, and no doubt. And if you go back, if you do any research at all, terahertz didn't even come onto the picture until basically when Puthoff and Green, well, we knew about it, but we were told to keep quiet about it till they brought Linda Moulton Howe down to Austin, and then she divulged that in on her on Whitley and then Coast to Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted terahertz out, and then they went further with this and Jacobson, and then Green, who it was just amazing because I was kind of led to believe this was all supposed to be quiet, and I never said much about it because, first of all, who's going to believe me in the first place? But second of all, I was asked to keep quiet, and then they divulged some of the stuff at Jacobson, and then he turns around and goes on a top secret, which everybody, in the UFO world says it's a debunking site. But he comes on, and they're debating after we announced my settlement with the government, which they did say I was injured in the line of duty in the forest during the Rendlesham incident, but they've never clarified what injured me. But he comes on and says, yeah, that's right. And he laid out a spiel on what injured me, that there is proof that it's there, and that, when I went through the whole spiel. So this is definitely they're moving forward with a program that I think has very little to do with disclosure, okay? And it has more to do with technology. That's my personal opinion. Now, I'll have the haters come after me and say I'm full of crap, but ultimately, I bet Linda twice already, and both years I said there won't be disclosure, and all these people said there was going to be disclosure in 18, and it didn't happen. We're at the end of 19, and it's not going to happen. We're not going to see disclosure. And in fact, without revealing who inside or more than one inside, they've even told me that don't even think about any of that even coming close to even getting on the radar for another 7 to 10 years for whatever reason.
Okay, so ultimately, what do you think? We'll continue this, of course, after the break. But ultimately, what are we dealing with here? Is TTSA a government project that is done outside of the Pentagon, where it is disguised as a public benefit corporation, but yet it is staffed by ex-CIA and DOD and counterintelligence professionals, career professionals, and that is actually what is going on?
Well, okay, you can't get through the veil of secrecy with these guys. Like, Lou will crack a joke like, well, I don't know if I still have my clearance or not. Well, if you've left Department of Defense and you're not actively working with them, or they have any intentions of bringing you back, your clearance is deactivated. And after 2 years, you're decertified. But he would know that, but he makes it look like he doesn't know. And I can't tell you today the status of Mellon and Puthoff and Green, but I know when I was dealing with Puthoff and Green back in 2010 to about 15, they were actively working inside the government.
Well, the last few months when I wrote those guys to ask them, for a comment or to come on the show, they had both said nearly identical, by the way, word for word, like it was a cut and paste response, a little bit different. But they said that they both have security oaths with the United States, and they're not going to break those.
Right. And you have to look at this. Those guys got, okay, this is probably going to tick people off again too, but I wish they just had a little bit of the money Bassett's wasted over the years. And the other people that think they're going to go up and get registered as lobbyists, they're going to get somewhere with this. They're not. You're going to get to an aide, okay, and if you're lucky, and it won't be a senior aide most of the time. But these guys can walk up there and get in the front door and meet directly with these Congress people, okay? And what's that tell you? you don't get into these committees. You don't meet with McCain. You don't get these briefings unless you still hold a security clearance. That means they're still actively working inside the government.
Well, and somebody got the Navy to come out and say that the objects in those 3 videos are unidentified aerial phenomenon. When you read that news, what went through your mind? Are they saying UFOs or
well,
what
that's
was the
where you
message?
go back to Con9 and what is a UAP, number one. And the second thing is, which is valley within what you can read through it, besides the FOIA I did, is that it has to do with plasmas and frequencies and energy fields. But ultimately, the Navy had no choice. Now, whether or not the Navy was just going to do this to get funding. So let's say they've got people inside these military services that say, we got to have this technology for whatever reason. Then they could be playing along. Or it could be the other way where these guys they've got these stuff, prototypes, R&D, papers, everything else, and they know it's going to work, and they're having trouble getting the money. And so they force some things, because it was interesting when the Navy said, well, we didn't say these videos were classified, they just weren't cleared for release.
Let's take go ahead.
So they put the Navy on the spot if they weren't playing along, where they had to say something.
Well, that's right.
Especially when they got the Congress people starting to get briefings on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to continue this when we come back. Our guest tonight, John Burroughs. We're discussing To the Stars Academy, ATIP, and the group of individuals that is staffing the To the Stars Academy. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, John Burroughs. We just put up a poll. Rita put up a poll. It's in Twitter about the best show of the week. And that has never happened before because we've had 3 amazing shows this week. And John, you're up in this poll and the show's not even done. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, okay, you brought up a point tonight a few times that we need to visit. If we go back to December 17th of 2017 and the days of disclosure, as that was called, and it was such a big deal, and here we are, we're closing in now on 2020, and nothing has happened since. And it is my position that it's zero, it's zilch. Everything that happened back then, and today we've gotten nowhere. But the counter argument to that is, despite everything and all the issues that are out there with Elizondo and To the Stars and everything else and the mistakes that have been made, that the counter argument is, but we're talking about UFOs, so nothing else matters. How do you deal with that?
Well, for me, okay, I look at it through a little bit different perspective. Okay, all right. If you just want to talk about UFOs, great. You're right. There's more to it. They're talking about it more, but it's the quality. There's quantity, but there's not quality. And what I mean by quality is that you can go any network and they've got a panel of experts on a lot of different things, but there's nobody to this day that there's no panel. And I'm not talking about guys like Dolan, and I'm not trying to jam on them, but they're not experts. I'm talking about scientists stuff. So none of this is being moved forward with these guys talking about the possibilities of whatever's going on in technology. You have Bigelow go on 60 Minutes, and they're interviewing him about his contract with the government, and he drops the bombshell that I thought was pretty impressive and pretty gutsy for a guy that's dealing with the Department of Defense, and everything else, to say, yeah, they're here, deal with it. But ultimately, did 60 Minutes follow up on it? No. And they didn't even follow up on it after the New York Times story and stuff. You would think they would at least do a piece on where we are technology-wise today and where did we get it and how we've advanced. And why would Bigelow say that? No. So you're not getting the serious news. And that unidentified, they made these bold promises to me even that they were going to do it differently. It was just another version of Ancient Aliens. So it's all entertainment, and it's all based on people making money off of it. And that's not what I'm about. I want to know what the hell's going on. I want to know what happened to me within reason on national security, whatever you want to justify that as. Do you understand what I mean?
I do. And because of the way that everything was handled, and I'm talking about the three videos, whether they were released by the Pentagon or not, whether Elizondo had anything to do with it or not, the fact that two of them were already out in the public domain beforehand anyway. But does that mean we're not going to see anything coming out of the Pentagon when it comes to videos in the future?
Well, you just have to go by what the Navy said. What did they say? So, they said, we're going to make it easier for the pilots to report it, and we're going to investigate it. And they made a big deal. They did this celebration, on unidentified and all that. But oh, wait a minute. We're not going to tell you what we find out.
Well, what was, for me, and I think the public grabbed onto this pretty quickly, it wasn't To the Stars that got the Navy to admit or use the term UAP. It was John Greenwald. And with the staff that is there, and you just mentioned it, these guys can go and open up all the doors that they need to open directly. You don't need a lobbyist or somebody else, but it wasn't them that did the big revelation about the Navy and UAPs and those videos. It was John Greenwald, and it was actually stumbled upon. It was an accidental that happened, but it was John that revealed that. It wasn't To the Stars that brought that forward. Even though they acted like it was a big deal, and they did make a big deal out of it, it didn't come from To the Stars.
Right. Okay. That's fair, but I don't think it was an accident by Greenwald. He's doing some of the same things, and I'm not trying to say that he's emulating me. He's doing his own thing, but he's doing the kind of stuff that I support and believe in. He's going after documents. Paul Dean does a good job of that too. And they're going after documents, and then they're trying to learn what they learned from that document and go after the next document. And was it an accident? I don't know. Why did they give it away? I mean, that's the interesting thing. They didn't have to do that. So he did due diligence, and he got them to admit stuff. And then you've got people saying, well, he's just part of the whole thing. Well, I don't think so. I mean, there was a backstory to why the government released it. And could it be somewhat because of the pressure that was going on within Congress? I don't know. That's a good question. But he's doing stuff that should be done. And I know he catches flack, and he's not a DeLong supporter, and neither am I, because this is serious. And I don't want a rock star with the way he does these things and the way he talks and acts, and the lack of things, people trying to get things done behind the scenes that have been blown off or not followed up with. That isn't who I want representing what happened to me and everything else. And if that pisses them all off, I don't care. And that's the difference between me and Dolan and those guys. I don't care.
Speaking about the future, when I think all of us assumed, and I was very excited, that To the Stars was about disclosure and supporting this community.
But Jimmy, let me ask you, was it about disclosure? Who said it was about disclosure within To the Stars other than DeLong?
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to reference this statement that Tom had me read on the air for Coast to Coast. And in that statement, I'm looking for it here. In that statement, here it is. He says, this was, now check this out, John. This is December 29th. This was my New Year's Eve weekend show at Coast to Coast, 2017. Statement from Tom DeLong. It says, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to say for all of your support, I want to thank you. And as you know, I created a vehicle that my team was able to supercharge and get the Pentagon to officially acknowledge the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena. Senator Harry Reid, the former majority leader, went on the record as well. Congress has ignited, and briefings will be starting soon if all goes well. So bear with me as we start talking about more gun camera footage, hardware, and even more expansive military encounters. It's all coming, but it's going to trickle out over the months ahead. I want to thank all of you again. I am one of you. I am a truth seeker. Tom DeLong, 12/29/2017. That's 2 years ago.
Right.
And here we are today talking about the future once again, chasing our tails. And the last thing that has happened with To the Stars is a defense agreement with the Army to look at metamaterials, and the Army, whatever they discover from that, gets to keep the tech.
Well, right. And that was one of my other questions that I've brought up before. First of all, whatever technology, listen, people and anybody that's been inside the government knows this. If there's something out there the military wants, they're going to take it. So that's just another reinforcement that Put Off and some of these other guys are working hand in hand with the DOD for technology, and that they are patriots. What they told you, they're not going to disclose classified material. So they're not in this for disclosure. They're in this to further technology. And is that the wrong thing? If they develop a starship and they go to the stars like they want, I don't have a problem with that. Okay. The problem I have is don't mislead. Okay. And some of it is the general public's fault, or the people within ufology. Just because the New York Times wrote an article and just because we talk about it more, that's not a bad thing, but that ain't disclosure, folks. And Bigelow said we're not going to have disclosure for a long time if we have it. And ultimately, this is all going to continue to be buried inside the secret deep state world, or whatever Bassett calls it, because they are not going to divulge military technology secrets that's going to benefit anybody else other than the United States government.
Where when Chris Mellon stepped up to the microphone back in October of 2017, the famous Mylar balloon photograph, and he steps up to the mic and says, and I'm quoting here, this is word for word, he says, "Clearly this is not an experimental U.S. aircraft, but whose is it?" Well, that was Chris Mellon's statement. He was talking about a Mylar balloon. And at that point, on that very day, they started to sell stock to the general public to the Stars Academy. And they were using that Mylar balloon along with this statement from Chris Mellon to sell that stock and get to the bottom line of UFO technology. And here we are today. We're at the exact opposite of what the mission statement was back then versus now, today, and what To the Stars is doing, right?
Right. And you could say that they may be trying to educate the public, whoever they is. And what I mean is, obviously, that Mellon and Put Off and those guys are involved with this with DeLong. And the entertainment end is to re-educate the public on what it is, whatever that is. And I can't tell you what it is myself. I have a better understanding of some things through documents and reading and stuff, but ultimately that ain't going to happen anytime soon. And the ultimate thing is, I get tired of hearing people say, well, next month's disclosure, and they're going to do it. Well, I don't believe for 1 minute they're going to do it, just for the national security reason alone. And if we ever admit that there's something else out there, they've kind of done that anyway. So you can't deny that there's something going on, but they're not going to clarify what it is. You understand what I'm saying? Are
you saying To the Stars or the Department of Defense?
Well, that was one of your questions. Is To the Stars just an arm or an extension of the Department of Defense?
That's right.
And I would say, based on what's going on, if they weren't when they started, they are now.
Do you expect the clarification of Luis Elizondo and what his job actually was, and a full document disclosure, so that part of this mess could be put to bed? Can we expect that?
Has anybody asked Lou?
he's certainly probably listening right now. I have yes, I have written to the stars and gave them a list of questions about this.
Right, but I mean, that's my point. I mean, do I expect it? Well, I would have thought as soon as he came under attack, they would have done it.
Say that again?
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. When I announced to the world that I got my settlement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I proved it. And not only did I prove it, I went to a reporter, Billy Cox, who verified the documents and wrote a story on it.
Right.
So I proved it, and then Kit Green backed it up with more information. Why haven't they done that?
I don't know. Is it because, see, there's another aspect to this, though, John. When you have CNN, Fox, New York Times, Washington Post, and every other media outlet, mainstream media that has reported on this story, has introduced Lou Elizondo in print and in live video as being the director of ATIP. Well, where are the retractions? And why the question has been raised. Does mainstream media go back and correct the past? Is that why To the Stars is not coming forward to clear this up? Because you have the entire last 2 years that is going to have to be redacted.
Well, I guess you could say that. And what I mean is that, well, if they lied about that or weren't truthful about that, what can you believe on anything they're saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to bring up another person's name that you've had on the show and I've dealt with, and I wrote a book with him, Nick Pope. Mm-hmm. He came out and said, he ran the UFO desk at the MOD. And then there's been other people saying, well, wait a minute, all you did was a clerk. Well, then some documents just came out in this last document dump that basically verified what people were saying. He was just basically a clerk inside the MOD, and he really had very little, if any, knowledge on what went on. And those are declassified documents from the MOD. And Nick tries to spin his way out of it, but they're true. And then the last thing is a last heave-ho, just like what they've done now with Lewis. Well, they're just trying to discredit him for what he is. Well, wait a minute. If you really are what you say you are, just show the proof.
It would be easy. Emails. How about a business card? How about a schedule of events? Anything there must be. John, it's very simple. If you did this for years, then you are sitting on a pile of stuff. And if you are going to a company and asking to be hired, then you have the documents to back up what you are saying on your resume. It's very simple.
Well, right, but see, they've kind of spun him out as a technical guy, and he's not. Where's his background in technology? You know what I mean? Analyzing and technology and stuff. You have to get degrees in that, and they use different specializations. So, but here's the thing. That's the problem with some of this, the ones and zeros you call it, or the technicalities. Lou is Lou, and does he have some knowledge and probably worked inside some of this? No doubt. Have they made him bigger than life? Possibly. Could that backfire on him? Maybe. Or did they do that purposely? Because eventually what I'm waiting to see is, does this all fade away?
Do you think that it feels like that could be a real possibility?
Well, when they came out and said they were about to go broke, a year ago on the financials?
Right.
Then it was all paid up front and they were about to go broke and they could all run out of funding. That made me believe, my first comment was, well, it's entertainment, so they've covered their butt at that end. And all they're going to do is when they get these contracts, what company do they form or do they already have, which would be Earth Tech, that's going to get the contract? And that would be what if I was Greenwald. If I was going to do it, I'd like to find out. I'd do the FOIA on who got the contract. From the Army. What company got it?
Oh, inside of a TTSA.
Yeah, TTSA is entertainment. They did not get the government contract. They did not. The United States Army did not award a contract to an entertainment company. Think about that for a minute.
Right.
Now, the people in TSA are involved in the contract, but what company got the contract?
Why there's another aspect of this too as well. Well, we're always trying to get everybody's collective experiences together, and let's put these different situations together and try to figure out what's going on. But when it comes to TTSA, they want to control the narrative now when it comes to the UFO question, that everybody else is wrong, the community is wrong, we've got it completely off kilter, and that they are sitting on this information, and it's their story, and that's how we move forward. Is that dangerous?
Well, yeah, because it depends. See, you've got guys inside this organization that know how to profile people. And what's the first thing they did? Lavenda came out and said, we don't care about the UFO field. Mm-hmm. Well, all that did was fire up the UFO field to get more involved, and some people did turn against them, but they slowly came back and they bought people off as they went along with different projects and different things. But ultimately, they want to be king of the hill. And in theory, they are, because they did get the New York Times to do it. And they can get inside the halls of Congress, and they can do all that. And that's great. But ultimately, where I draw the line, me personally, is, okay, don't sell me a bill of goods that you're going to benefit the country as far as disclosure and all that other stuff, when that's not really what's taking place.
No. And here we are 2 years later. And I would definitely, if I was a betting man, I would say that a year and 10 months has gone by with no revelations. And I don't know what they could do now to announce or make something else, another statement or proof.
Well, here's what's going to me, this is what'll have to happen. It'll either be like a Contact scenario, the movie Contact, you know what I mean, where they come out, they pick up a signal, and they've been hinting at that now for 2 years?
Yes.
They're analyzing that. So that could be the way they do it, subtly, that there's a signal out there and it's light years away, but there seems to be intelligence behind it, and we're going to work on that. That could be a safe way to do it. Or the other way is what I really, for just a brief moment, and I don't lie, I really wondered what Trump was going to do when he went on Tucker. And the president, whoever that will be, the next 4 years or whenever they decide, I still think probably will be the one that will be the driving force. I don't know how it'll come down, but he'll be the one that will announce to the world that we're not alone.
I was checking my phone and the internet like every 30 seconds when that was imminent, and I was let down. And the reason why I was let down is they held it off all the way to the end of Tucker, right? Playing it up in the commercials, and then it turned out to be 15 seconds of nothing at the end of the show, which shows you that Fox knows what is driving advertising sales, right? The UFO question.
Right. It's entertainment, and it's bringing the money. And that's what I mean with there's been no serious, there's been no panels put together. There's been no follow-up, anything like along the Sagan type of thing, what he did, when he did his documentaries. There's been no 60 Minutes. You would think some news organization would at least to do a 2-hour special, you know what I mean, on the 1 year anniversary, let alone the 2, on what does this mean and what does it mean going forward. And I don't dislike Tucker Carlson, but that whole thing was Tucker has no clue to what he was just asking a question that the staff put together.
Well, again,
there was a couple potential follow-up questions that he didn't do.
The question is, though, and let's wrap with this. I mean, the question that everybody wants an answer to is, does the Pentagon or any of the 3-letter agencies, are they in possession of a crashed or donated alien ET craft from off of this planet? That's the question. It's not about contact or if we are alone. Do they have this technology in their possession?
Well, I agree, but the biggest question is, our advancements in technology, I think, can be traced backwards if you do it right. And there's going to be some gaps, and I think that what did they learn and where is it from? And people say that Condine's not important as a document. Is it a defining document? No, but there's a lot of good stuff in there, and there's a lot of stuff that's still classified. And it was the one that used the UAP first, and then Clinton took off with her little interviews and Podesta and all that. But ultimately, there's something to do with there's some kind of intelligence there. And the question is it, where did it come from? And one of the things that we can close on is Eric Davis, when he did our show, said and it was right at the end, so I didn't get a chance to really visit it the way I wanted to. He said, look at it this way. He said, we visited the moon and left technology behind. He goes, he implied that probably some of what's going on is there was left behind technology at some point in the history of the Earth.
On the moon.
Well, no, like what we left on the moon, some kind of civilization left some technology.
Here on planet Earth, and we
right,
found
but that
it.
doesn't. He didn't say they just visited or visiting now. He just said there's. You can look at it there's a good chance of what we're looking at is how we left technology behind on the moon. Some kind of civilization at some point left technology here.
And I can already tell, and I didn't think that we would do this back in 2017. But here we are at the end of 2019, and we're going to start hearing. Well, you know what? We're gonna reveal next year. It'll be 2020.
They're not going to do anything during the elections.
Well, 2020 is going to roll by, and we're going to hear it. It'll be 2021, and then it'll be 2022. Right?
Well,
and
you heard it from John first. Inside sources that I can't reveal said don't look for anything until 2024, 2025.
There you go. John, okay, so what's up next? I know you're going to be at Contact in the Desert, right?
Yep, going to do the Contact in the Desert. I was supposed to go last year and I had family emergency, couldn't go. Going to go, and we're going to do a presentation. It's 40 years for Rendlesham next year. And we're also going to, the attorney that helped me with all this is going to be there. So we'll do a workshop. And I still haven't gotten a hold of her yet, but I'm going to try to. Cheryl lives close by, the lady that worked with the McCain's office and was unidentified. Try to get her to come up and talk a little bit about her work in it, and just to show that there is something going on. Because the United States government, I'm one of the few that publicly has been admitted to, and there's one other guy inside Rendlesham that's gotten a settlement from the government for injuries sustained during the event. So we encountered something, and according to the British, it was UAP radiation. So there you go.
Thank you so much, John. Be safe out there. Best to the family, and look forward to seeing you in 2020 out there at Contact in the Desert.
Yeah, and happy holidays, Jimmy.
Thank you, John. You too.
Thanks. Yep, bye.
John Burroughs, what a conversation. Yeah, that's a show of the week right there. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to open up the phone lines. I want to hear from all of you. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.